Hey, we're Greaser Consulting. You're Houston for sales engagement. In this video, we're going to cover content enablement. It's a sales engagement function that often gets overlooked, but it's needed to make sure that reps know the content they have at their fingertips and how to use it. Are you ready to learn? Let's go. Hey, I'm here with Erika Davis, Head of Content, Greaser Consulting, and today we are talking about content enablement. And so here's the deal. A lot of times we think about enablement, and it's we're enabling the reps to learn to sell better. We're enabling them to use the technologies in a way where they're growing in their capability to use the technology to execute their sales process. But sometimes we find that like people miss content enablement. And so, Erika, why don't we just start off, like, what is content enablement? Give us the foundations here.
So content enablement is the process of keeping reps in the loop when you create new content, and also ensuring that feedback loop from the reps back up the content supply chain. Just making sure that the feedback loop goes in that direction as well. I think people put a lot of effort typically into high-level content strategy, and then obviously a lot of effort goes into producing the writing. But a lot of times when it's delivered to the end user, people don't see that part up the chain. They don't see the strategy that went into it. They don't see the discovery and the process of writing. And so by the time the content gets in their sales engagement platform, they might not understand the purpose or how it was written or why it was written. And so they also might not know how to give feedback that's helpful for the rest of the content supply chain. So enablement really focuses on that last sort of point of contact in the content supply chain to make sure that that content gets adopted, and then also facilitates the feedback loop back up the chain.
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake, right, for teams to come up with some great content, stick it in their sales engagement platform, and then like nobody knows about it. It's just in there, right?
Yeah, a lot of resources go into creating content. Right. And so, yeah, it is a shame if content gets uploaded and reps look at it and they just don't understand how to use it, or they don't think it's relevant, but then they can't give that feedback to the correct person because they're not sure who wrote it or why. So it's a miss in both ways for sure.
Who normally, like from a team perspective, who normally does the content enablement? Like what are some of the roles that you've seen carry this function out?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the size of the team and the maturity of the sales org, it could be the team manager. If you have one sales team, like a startup, it's very often the team manager, because the team manager is very often the content manager, the content writer, and the content enablement person. Like they kind of do it all. And even in a lot of large enterprise companies that we work with, the team manager is also responsible first and foremost for that content enablement. And then in addition, there might be an org sales trainer that might do a little bit of content enablement, especially in onboarding new hires or quarterly check-ins, or, on some sort of cadence. But typically when there's new content added, it's the team manager or some kind of trainer. Other orgs have a sales enablement or sales engagement specialist. I'm seeing more and more titles now that have revenue operations manager and things like that. So that person may be involved as well. But most of the time, the team manager does at least some of it. And then not only facilitates the introduction of new content to reps, but also monitors adoption and raises their hand first to say, hey, maybe we need the sales trainer in here to support this team because no one on my team is actually using this. So let's get some help. And it might not be the content manager the team manager carrying out all of it, but at least they're kind of the first person to understand if the content's being adopted or not.
So there's some options for you. There's different roles out there that can undertake this. Who does this well though? Like, what have you seen from teams? Like, who does content enablement really well, and like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think cross-departmental collaboration is really key. So I think when we see really successful content enablement, that person is not only working really closely with the director level in the sales org to understand what the goals are for the quarter, what the strategy is, so they can make sure that the end users understand how the content fits in to their KPIs. I think that's really, really important to incentivize salespeople. And so really successful sales enablement works closely with sales leadership. They also work closely with the team manager. And it's also really important that reps are involved in the entire creation process. So when they get content uploaded into their sales engagement platform, if they're just hearing about this content for the first time,
Yeah.
I think that's already a miss. But
Skepticism sets in.
yeah, but if you involve them in the process and they remember, oh hey, I've seen several drafts of this before. I approved this final edit and now it's in my sales engagement platform. I can't wait to use it. Right? So that makes the enablement really much smoother than it would be if the content was written, by it's even a team manager who knows their reps and understands what they need and just plugs it in without consulting reps. So it's just really important to have reps involved in the process. So when they see that in their SEP, they're already ready to go and they're excited about it.
Yeah, if you haven't watched the video where we talk about content writing or content management, go back and watch that, because we hit on those, because it's really important to involve your reps. A lot of times folks just want to take that writing process and just remove it from the, reps having any involvement in it, and that's because they might have been scarred a little bit, because at some point in their journey, like, reps were writing all the content and it was like stuff was everywhere. There was some good stuff in there, but it's really hard to make sense of it. But you have to involve reps so that they have buy-in, so there's adoption, but there's a right way to do it. And it sounds like, Erika, you're saying it kind of, when they're involved, it like dangles the carrot, and like they're ready once the content is released and it's put into the sales engagement platform. Then they're expectant. The expectancy is already there for them.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So the next question I have is that, what does content enablement actually look like? Is it, are we setting up Zoom calls and having all the reps get on and the managers and, hey, this is the new enablement that's hit? Is it like pre-recorded videos that we want folks to watch? Is it, here's our content enablement newsletter, or here's the stuff that's going to hit this week, next week, etc.? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, I think it could look like any of the things that you just mentioned. I think what's really important is to understand sort of
anything's better than nothing.
Yes, I think that's
what you're saying.
Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure I could think of a counterexample, but for now, I think that's a fair statement. I think it depends. Like, I think you really have to know where your point A and where your point B are, because, for example, we work with a lot of teams who are launching outreach in an enterprise org, for example, and the cadence of enablement that you need when you're launching outreach or another sales engagement platform or any kind of sales engagement or sales enablement tools, the cadence of enablement is going to be very different than when you're in maintenance mode. And so, yeah, when you're first launching something or you're rolling out a new strategy, you do want several meetings, and you want to be able to make the purpose of each meeting very, very clear, especially if tech is involved, and especially if your level of familiarity across the team with that tool or that strategy varies a lot, because you're going to have some people who are going to tune in to Zoom sessions, for example, and just think they know it all and just kind of skip over it. And then other people are going to come and they're going to feel really overwhelmed. So I think it's really important to give your team a lot of support when you're adopting something new, and to not assume that everyone's got the same level of familiarity with it. So I think that's just a really important assumption to get past in the beginning. And then we've also
what about documentation? Like, I know one of the functions that we have that we promote for folks is, document your process so that you can scale it better. And I would think that there has to be some documentation on the content enablement side, just so, folks know where to find, hey, what's the latest and greatest? Is that a best practice?
Um, yeah, I think we've worked with teams who have built, internal resources for their teams. So they have their own internal wiki, for example, that'll have frequently asked
Yeah.
questions, or have on a dashboard, have the current quarter's content that's new. So everything that's new is in one place and they can find it all the time. I think it's dangerous, in my opinion, to assume that reps are going to spend hours like looking at resources. What they want to do, they want really
That's
quick,
good.
fast, easy answers. And also you need to be able to tie the outcome very closely to the content process you want them to adopt. And so I think, again, it comes back to consulting reps. I get very nervous when people talk about building things like this and their reps are not involved in the process. It's really important that they see the value, because essentially they're your customers, right? Yeah, I think thinking about the
That's
reps
really
as the
good.
customers for this content
So
is a
good.
really helpful way to think about it, because if they don't adopt it, it's because they don't see the value. Because if reps have a quota, or they're getting paid according to their performance, they're going to adopt something they think is helpful, whether or not it's
Yeah.
familiar or not. And so
So
I
don't
think,
create the one sheeter and then like without some sort of enablement, hey, here's how you actually take this and use it. A standalone one sheeter or a newsletter or whatever, you're like that's not gonna no one's I should say no one, but not everybody is gonna look at that.
yeah, and it could be a helpful piece, but I think you need some kind
Yeah.
of live interaction where reps can give feedback. Another thing that I've heard a lot, especially in larger organizations, is that reps are very hesitant to give especially critical feedback, when they think it means more work for them. So if you ask reps for feedback, and then you're like, okay, well, you rewrite this content, then they're going to say, well, I'm not going to speak up anymore, because that just means more work for me, which is the whole point. Is why I'm not using this content in the first place, is because it feels like more work. But if you go to reps and you say, hey, I want to schedule 15 minutes with you, and I just want you to give me all of the criticism that you have, and after that, I'm not going to ask you to do anything about it. We're just going to take that feedback and make your job easier. That's usually how we approach that when we go in and write content and do content enablement. And all of a sudden, reps have all of these opinions, and a lot of times managers come back to us and they say, hey, I had no idea that my team was feeling that way. And we're like, well, how did you enable them to give feedback in the past? And usually that was some sort of asynchronous way, like a form or something like that, that felt like extra work. But if you get reps live on the phone and you just say, okay, like tell me what's wrong with this system that we built, they'll tell you. And that's really important to get that feedback.
Love it. When we're talking about, what if we didn't have this function, right? If we don't have content enablement, one of the consequences is that there's no content adoption. The adoption is not at the level that you would like to see. What are other consequences of not having content enablement?
Yeah, I think again, working cross-departmentally can be really difficult. So a lot of times, especially with like an SDR or an ISR type of team, you have a lot of that content coming from marketing, because it is such high volume outbound.
Oh,
And so sometimes if your SDRs, for example, have KPIs that marketing owns, but that sales is in charge of managing that team, it can be really difficult for the sales reps to manage those competing priorities. And so enablement can be really helpful, because again, they can understand that problem and they can help solve that problem, because it's really not up to the reps to solve that problem. And I think so often people get really stuck between the end user and then kind of the next level up. But enablement really helps smooth that out and helps the reps focus on what they need to do, while just making sure that sales, marketing, demand gen are all aligned in terms of what is expected of sales reps. I think another major consequence of not having enablement function is that, especially from a marketing perspective, a lot of times marketing works really hard to stay on a schedule of producing thought leadership type content, for example, that it might go on a website or on a blog, but it's also a really good opportunity for sales reps to take some of that content and send it out to their prospects or their customers. And so without content enablement, reps might not know where to find that content. And I like marketing people will often say, I send an email out every week. Like every Monday, I send an email out with all these assets that we've produced. But again, that takes reps going into their inbox, looking at all the content and reviewing it, reading it to understand what the value is, and then remembering to use it. And even though we get that input from marketing all the time that they're doing it, we also hear from sales reps all the time that they're constantly looking for assets to send people to add value to emails, and they'll spend 1, 2, 3 hours a day looking for content to send, and marketing is just kind of sitting there like scratching their head like, how is this happening? And again, content enablement, it really helps just put that right in front of the end user and points to it to say, hey, if you have, like a CFO in the utilities industry, like this is the content for them. And that just makes it really easy for reps to say, okay, cool, I trust this, and just send it out. And without the sales enablement function, the content enablement function, sometimes that content just sort of gets lost.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So as far as other functions that the content enablement function would work with, what are they, and how do they work together?
Yeah, so the content enablement function is going to work really closely with the content writer. And the reason why is that both of these functions work very closely with reps. And so even scheduling, like there might be enablement sessions where the writer and the enablement function are both present. They might be the same person as well, but both of those functions should be present in some of the meetings. The content manager also, it's really important, especially when the feedback loop reverses. So when the content enablement person gets feedback from reps, they're going to pass that up to the content manager and the writer
it's
as well.
The end around in the football game, right? You don't. Yeah, that's important to note, because you have to have that. You have to have that happen. There has to be feedback that comes.
Totally. And I think you said there that the content manager is like the conductor of the symphony, right? So I think if the conductor doesn't understand what's going on at the end, right? If the conductor is just really out of that
something's going to be out of tune.
and they're not going to be able to correct the process further up the chain, right? If they're getting feedback from reps, for example, that says, hey, we're getting this general content and I'm not going to send anything that's not industry based. And so that content manager can then say, okay, well, we don't have that in our plan. We don't have that in our content roadmap. And so that's even a higher level strategy thing that needs to be figured out with the content owner. Or maybe that the feedback is, hey, we want more links to assets in these sequences. And that's something that could be brought up with the content writer, the content manager. That doesn't actually need to get kicked up to the owner, but everything needs to be communicated well to the manager, because they're really facilitating the whole process. So they need to be involved if there's any major roadblocks or successes too, because then they can duplicate that and replicate that, scale that across the org, right? That's the dream, right? So,
that's the dream.
So if the manager doesn't know what's going on, it's hard to scale.
That's great. Now, from a leadership standpoint, if I'm leading the content enablement function, how do I support them? What are some things I can do to make sure that they have what they need?
Yeah, so I think being able to make sure that the content enablement person is in touch with all of the right people is really important. For example, if I'm in charge of supporting reps as a content enabler, and again, these reps are sort of being held to KPIs from both sales and marketing, or there's some kind of overlap. If I don't have transparency into how success is being measured, I'm not really going to be able to lead people to success or help support them with materials or with process that's going to help their success. So I need not only to have the right contacts within the org so I can make sure that it's all aligned, but I also need really easily facilitated communication, and I need transparency into how success is being measured. And so the leader can really introduce that content enablement person to the right people, and just help them really understand who they need to be taking direction from, because it might be several points within the company and there might be misalignment. And so again, I think this comes up with a lot of functions that we've talked about, is that if there's misalignment at the leadership level, that's I think sometimes especially in a larger organization, like every tier down that misalignment continues, it expands. And it just causes more confusion, more busy work, more time spent trying to figure out exactly what's expected than actually doing the work. And, that's just part of running an organization. I think you're going to have that, but the sooner up the chain that you can fix that, the less overall waste there's going to be in the company. And so as a leader, listening to that enablement person is really important. And if you need to fix something at a leadership level, like not just passing that off to someone else to figure out, because that's impossible. If you don't have decision-making power, you're not going to be able to fix that misalignment, and you're just not going to be able to empower reps.
Love it. You're like a chiropractor. You just
exactly.
pop, just align that spine, right? So that there can be the blood flow that needs to happen, and the healing and all that good stuff. So awesome. Well, thank you, Erika. This has been fantastic. I hope that you're watching here and you really enjoy this and you get something that you can apply today. So thanks for joining in, and make sure you watch the other sales engagement function videos as well.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something that you can apply today. If you're not receiving our monthly Greaser Drip where we share our insights, make sure you go to our website and subscribe so we can get that to you. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel here so that way you don't miss any videos like this one. And don't hesitate to reach out. If you need help with your sales engagement efforts, we want to talk to you. We want to hear how we can help. And until next time, this is Houston. Over.